How long did it take you to think up of the name of your show?
Well, I thought cult movies. I'll work backwards from there,
Yeah.
and then it's the kind of name that if people mistype it in Google, they get a nice surprise. So
Well,
it's
yes.
I imagine. I haven't checked.
Yeah.
I don't want to check.
We'll see you in court.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Oh, hi, Mark.
It's delicious. Oh my God!
You're heading to FrightFest next week as we speak with your new film, I Am Monsters. Are you excited about it?
So yeah, I'm excited and scared. I'm very pleased with the way it looks and it sounds. I've managed to get some very good people on board with me. And when we did that screening, there were a couple of guys who had nothing to do with the project, just asked if they heard that we were doing the test, could they come in and watch? And they said they really enjoyed it. So I felt an awful lot better after that. But yeah, excited, scared, and because it's vulnerable, I'm laying bare a lot about my life. So yeah.
Oh, great. Well, I'm excited to follow the progress of it, and I've seen a screener already. But before we get into talking about the sort of specific details, I guess we
Sure.
should start with talking about your introduction to film as a viewer, as a human being. How did you come to film? What is your relationship with film and maybe horror in general? Were you always a film lover, or is it something you've come to later in life?
I was a lover of film. I remember the first film I saw was Disney's Tenderfoot, a really obscure cowboy film.
Okay.
And this will be in the very early 1960s. Saw it on the big screen and was entranced by that. I was very much into theatre as a kid and growing up as well. My introduction to, and ghost stories I read, and myths and legends and so on, as I mentioned in the show. So I was very much into the literature and ghost stories and so on. And then I was introduced to the films really in my teenage years when they used to show horror films on Friday evenings on BBC Two, I think.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
a strand showing all the Universal monster films. Oddly enough, the way it came about was kind of by accident. They were showing, I got to the age where I was allowed to stay up late and watch late night films.
Yeah.
And they were showing the Marx Brothers films.
Okay.
And I think they showed about 4 or 5 weeks of those. And then it suddenly switched to the horror films, the Universal. And I was like, oh, Mum, can I have a look at that? Because yeah, going all right. She wasn't worried about it and she watched them with me. So that was my first introduction to horror films as such.
Great. And are you able to separate your work from, seeing other horror films? Can you still enjoy horror, having had such a big experience
Yes.
in it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think that half your mind as a writer of films and a director and so on, you have that brain
Yeah.
that's going to watch. I think I heard Martin Scorsese talking about this the other day. It's like, actually, Aaron Sorkin saying you do have to switch off and just sit as a member of the audience, enjoy it. I talk a lot about intelligent horror. I think horror has the power to talk about really interesting things to do with life, death, sex,
Yeah.
and to take a very non-normal, non-romantic. Doesn't say that horror can't be romantic. There are some very romantic horror films. But I get very interested in those kind of twists and what's going on. That's what interests me.
And what are some of your favorite films, and what are some of your favorite horror films?
Some of my favorite films. Oh, that's really interesting. I will tend, if it's not horror, it's not going to be romantic comedy. It tends to be sci-fi and things like Star Wars and so on, the classics. I like film noir. I'm a big fan of film noir, black and white, the original film noirs. I do like those a lot. But in terms of horror, it's Roger Corman and Vincent Price and Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
My all-time standout favorite horror film is The Mask of the Red Death, starring Vincent Price.
Nice.
Which is, and I talked about intelligent horror earlier on, and it's it's very much a meditation about a pandemic, funnily enough, a plague,
Yeah.
the Red Death, and why the hell has God let this happen? Therefore, God has obviously abandoned this world. We might as well worship Satan. That's right. I've just magically had a glass of water placed on the desk beside me because I have a wonderful husband.
You discussed Satan, and then a glass of water appeared next to you to cleanse you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Theatre of Blood, again, one of my favorites. Just a brilliant film, very much in the style of another one of my favorite of Vincent Price films, which is The Abominable Dr. Phibes.
Oh, okay, I've not seen that
And
yet.
The Return of Dr. Phibes.
Right.
Strange films and stylistically amazing. And Vincent Price doesn't speak. He speaks through a thing in the back of his neck in The Abominable Dr. Phibes.
Okay.
So he's wearing a lot of makeup for a lot of the movie, and when he's not wearing makeup, his face doesn't move. It's all done with the eyes and so on. Basically, I am just a huge fan of Vincent Price. I think it was Vincent Price that really entranced me as far as horror was concerned.
Fantastic. So, well, talking about makeup, that seems like a good time to move into your career and your most noticeable work for horror fans, or perhaps the most familiar for horror fans. So for people who don't know you or who may not recognize you unmasked, what are some of the roles that you're most known for, and what is your background?
Okay, so it starts off with I have to use the other hand, don't I? Because it's in trying to point to the figure behind us. So if you look at those figures behind me, those are the ones where I start off, and that's the Chatterer Cenobite from Hellraiser. Next to it is a sketch by Clive Barker of the Chatterer type character, which he did a few years ago for me. And then if we move across, there's the Chatterer again, and we have Kinski from Nightbreed. I love these the two lower ones are really interesting, fascinating art done on beaten out pieces of metal and painted on, and mixed up with Christian saints as well. They come from Mexico. Absolutely beautiful pieces of things, absolutely entrancing. And then if I move my head to one side, you can see the Chatterer and me done as a kind of a Victorian thing. So that's if people obviously don't know my real face, but those are where I started out.
And you're watching your film, you talk about your background in theatre and then suddenly being propelled into this world of monsters and nightmarish figures, and suddenly having to go from being a working actor to someone who's been completely transformed into this other creature. So I found that really fascinating. I'm also an actor myself, so the idea of I guess it's sort of the pros and cons of being able to completely hide yourself away and be this complete transformation, but also the fact that you're suddenly not yourself anymore. You're not recognizable in any way. So how did you deal with that change from going from presenting as yourself to the complete takeover of your image, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because I think it becomes, particularly in the case of Chatterer. Okay, so there's if you think about Chatterer, then you can think about Kinski. Kinski, it's very much, I can see, I can speak, I have lines. Two very different experiences. I think it helps. It always helps. When I first started acting, doing amateur dramatics, we used to use grease paint. I mean, literal 5 and 9 was what you started off your bake. So there was always a process of applying makeup, which was part of the ritual of becoming the character. So I think there's always that physical process. Now, in terms of the Chatterer, it's that thing of, somebody said, I can't remember quite what the word he used. It's very measured, very precise performance. Because I was so restricted, you therefore just do what you can. And I think Doug Bradley has talked about this a lot with Pinhead.
Yeah.
Clive was always telling Doug to do less. In my case, I could hardly do anything anyway.
Yeah.
Therefore, literally the thing I could do was grapple with Ashley Lawrence, who was playing Kirsty, because the only Cenobite who actually touches anybody is the Chatterer.
Yeah.
And then it's that thing of just letting this extraordinary makeup do its work.
Yeah.
And this is, and again, somebody was talking to, we all, when I think of the four Cenobites, myself, Doug Bradley, Simon Bamford, Barbie Wilde from Hellraiser 2. Because Grace from Hellraiser 1 doesn't do conventions. I know we all have our fans. Everyone has their favorite Cenobite, it appears.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And I think when I talk to people about the Chatterer, why they find Chatterer so intimidating, I said, because he doesn't speak. You can't bargain with Chatterer. Pinhead, you can have a conversation with. There's dialogue going on. Kirsty makes bargains with. Chatterer doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's going to go. He's going to attack you. He's going to do something nasty to you. I mean, he's very much Pinhead's right-hand man. I think there's very much implied that he won't do anything without the permission of Pinhead.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. In terms of how one approaches a part like that, it's finding what the restrictions are, working within those restrictions. I think that's a lot to do with art. Is that a lot of art comes out of restriction. Yeah. You find a way of making a voice heard, expressing what you're trying to say through restrictions.
Yeah.
That's part of the process. That's part of the actor's process.
Yeah, fantastic. And so having done Hellraiser, were you then, because it must have been a very short time between Hellraiser and Nightbreed.
Hellbound. Yeah, well,
and Hellbound.
Yeah, so it was Hellbound first. We did. It was in 3 years in total. But from when we started filming Hellraiser, Nightbreed was the following year. Then we skipped a year, and then so basically, it was 96, 97, then 99 when we were making these films. So it was a great period. As far as a career was concerned, running and so on. But then again, of course, there was a lot of time hanging around and not doing stuff and doing fringe stuff and so on, whilst there was other stuff in between.
Did you think about the fact that you were being cast as a monster actor? Did that ever sort of play on your mind, or did you just think, great, I've got another job, I'm working, this is great?
I always, coming back to Vincent Price, who always said, thank heavens for typecasting.
Right.
I think it was kind of strange for me, because after Nightbreed, I realized actually two things happened. To Clive moved to the United States, and Clive had been the major source of my work and so on. And then the time I kind of thought, you know what, I want to actually do writing. And I ended up by writing comics that I talk about in the film. So it was that I would have loved if I had ended up, I think, just by doing, had this sort of career like Doug Jones has had.
Yeah.
Just working underneath rubber.
Yeah.
I'm smiling. I love Doug Jones. He's just the nicest human being on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And I have a photograph up there somewhere behind me that says, "To Nick, my brother under the rubber," which always makes me smile. So I think, if that had happened, I'd have been very happy with that.
Yeah.
Because it's work and so on. Having said that, obviously you want to act without all that palaver and be in front of state theatre and so on.
Yeah.
There's always, I suppose it's like, there's always a dichotomy.
Yeah.
As far as that is concerned.
Obviously, a lot of these themes come up about the work and how it got started. But how did the idea of the show come about, and what made you want to do it as a stage show initially?
I had been the patron of the London Horror Festival for about 5 years at that stage. So it was first performed in 2019. It opened the 2019 London Horror Festival. I was watching a lot of really exciting horror theatre.
Yeah.
We talked about horror films. I have to say, being in a small theatre of about 60 people and watching horror that is actually happening within 4 or 5 feet of you is a very different experience to watching it on the film.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. And so I'm a big fan of theatre, but there were a number of one-man shows going on. And it really just, and I thought, you know what? I think I've got something to say. I want to talk about what it is. I've played monsters. I've been made to feel I'm a monster. I'm a human being, therefore I've acted as if I've done monstrous things in my time where I'm ashamed about and really wish I'd done things differently. And I think that is a lot of the human condition. I just wanted to talk about it. And I thought, okay, well, I've got all these stories about Hellraiser as well. And I think people would come along and enjoy those stories, particularly if I can weave in the things about being gay, growing up gay, but also finally revealing for the first time really why the Chatterer looks the way he does, which I'd never really spoken about before.
Yeah.
So that was the impetus for doing the one-man show.
Fantastic. And then you toured that show, is that right? You toured
took it to I managed to take it to Las Vegas.
Oh wow. Okay.
I was basically invited to a film festival where Clive Barker was the guest of honor.
Right.
And my manager said, Nick, I'm sure we can arrange to get you, and it would just be good. And I just thought, and it means Clive would have a chance to go and watch it. I'd obviously worked very closely with Clive on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd done all the writing, but obviously I wanted to make sure, because Clive has referenced an awful lot, and Clive is obviously a huge part of my creative career.
Yeah.
And it was just a chance of performing it to a completely full house. It was amazing. I was blown away by the fact that there wasn't a chair to be had. And Clive was sitting there in the audience and watched this thing with me. And that ran about 50 minutes. And I just thought, yeah, this is great. And next year I'm going to be taking it out on the road. And I was looking about how I was going to be able to sort this out and do all the financing. And obviously the pandemic happened.
Oh yes, that thing. Yeah.
That thing. And so it was okay. I rethink what am I going to do about this? And then during the pandemic, a gentleman called Mitch Harrod, who runs the Soho Horror Festival, said, obviously that was going online, and that became the Soho Horror Festival.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Which particularly concentrates on queer filmmaking.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, would you like to do some excerpts from I Am Monsters as part of this? And I think I put together something like 3 or 4 minutes of excerpts. And I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. I wonder if we can do something more about that. And I just, the opportunity, I'm chatting with Dark Rift Productions, Paul and Stuart from Dark Rift. They got enthusiastic about the idea. And we just thought, okay, we can do this. And we can make it interesting. We can. At the end of the day, it's me talking on stage. It's me talking for 70 minutes.
Yeah.
That is what the film is about.
Yeah.
But as you've seen, we did our best just to make that as interesting as possible.
Yeah.
With excerpts from literature that has influenced me and so on.
How did you sort of choose what to say and not what to say, and have you always been open like that about these sort of issues?
More open the older I've got, because the older you get, you think, I don't give a damn anymore. And also, as is explained during the film, I was touched upon during the film, I think I'm just tired of being scared. And I think that happens to a lot of people. It's just like, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore, to quote the film network. Doing this properly means just being honest. As honest as I can be about my story without denigrating other people necessarily. But because I'm talking about I am monsters. And what do we mean by being a monster, and how it's really easy to demonize other people and say that, they're monsters. And it was a difficult process in terms, it brought up a lot of stuff, to use the cliche. So a lot of the stuff was painful to talk about. And difficult, but I just thought, no, I owe it to people to be brave as I can be, and talk about stuff.
I think that's the film's or one of the film's many strengths, is how honest and surprising it is. But for I think fans and maybe not fans will, or people that aren't aware of your work, will still appreciate a human story. And that's what particularly interested me about your personal relationships and your sexuality and politics, and just all those sort of things, things that maybe you wouldn't expect from a horror documentary, or a documentary about the making of a horror character, a horror actor. So I thought that was particularly
well, thank you,
enjoyable to watch.
Good, because that's, and I think this is when I talked about showing the DCP, when the guys were talking to me afterwards, and it's like, oh, thank you, because that's what I hope. I hope it's not just for fans of the movie. That's what I was trying to do. I think it's more, it's much more than, as you say, just behind the scenes.
And it opens up a lot of really interesting questions and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily cross over with horror films and with horror characters. So it was really interesting to see that sort of those comparisons. So I thought it was great.
Okay, thank you.
Also, we should probably address the irony that you're also in another film called How to Kill Monsters.
I know. And of course is Stuart and Paul and Dark Rift, who are referred to, and it's a great cameo. It's really fun.
What are your plans for the film next? Obviously, you said there might be some things in the pipeline, but do you have aspirations to do more with it, or for any other possible future films?
There's a couple of other screenings at other film festivals that are definitely planned, and definitely one of which is confirmed, one of which is 95% confirmed. Then I am writing. I am working on, sort of gone back to the moment I finished editing this one and putting it together, is third volume of short stories, which I was supposed to be doing before the pandemic. Then during the pandemic, I really wasn't in the right headspace to be writing horror stories. The world was too frightening for me to be just not good for my mental health. Promised to show people 2 screenplays this year, hopefully. There's only one of them, which is a werewolf film. They'll go, that's going to cost a lot of money, Nick. Because it's a werewolf film, and werewolf films are all about the transformation.
That's you've pigeonholed yourself into too many different pigeonholes now. You've got to.
Oh, welcome to my it's at the start of the movie, I point out I was born a Gemini. And it's not referred to anyway. I think it's a very important for anyone who's interested in astrology. It's just a way of looking at psychology, as far as I'm concerned. And I remember one of my early lovers saying to me, Nick, you are not schizophrenic. Quadraphenic? Possibly. It's just like, my mind works like that. It's just like,
I can relate to that.
Yeah. It's just, I've got so many things in my head I want to get out into some sort of form, and that's the way it is.
Well, that's great, and I wish you all the best with I Am Monsters. I really enjoy watching it, and I'll be at FrightFest for the 5 days, so I look forward to meeting you in person as well. How can people find out more about the film, or about what you're up to? What's the best way?
nicholasvince.com. And you can sign up for a newsletter, a very sporadic newsletter. I only write when there's some sort of proper announcement to be made. Otherwise, I kind of hang around about, I suppose Facebook is where I post most and try and,
Yeah.
but again, very sporadically. Films about that.
Nicholas, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for letting me ramble on.
My pleasure. And all the best with Iron Monsters and FrightFest.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'll see you there.
Wonderful. I look
Thank you
forward
very
to
much.
it, Chris. Take care.
Take care.